welcome all of you to this pre-convention hearing for our 197th Diocesan Convention. We're going to hear tonight in outline about all of the business coming before convention, and we'll have an opportunity for questions. So we're delighted that you're here and hope that this will be a helpful time this evening. Let us begin with prayer for our convention. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Let us pray.
Thank you for the beauty of your creation, and thank you for beautiful fall Maine days. Please watch over us tonight as we gather together to plan for our upcoming convention and to do the work of your church. Help us to be patient with one another and to love one another and to all arrive in our homes safe tonight. All this we ask in your name. Amen.
I want to begin this evening with a kind of brief orientation to the 197th convention. It's a one-day convention. It's going to be Saturday, October 22nd at the University of Southern Maine in Portland. We met there last year, and those of you who were there last year will know how to get there. There are directions, instructions in the pre-convention materials. And the good news is the parking is convenient and free.
Full breakfast is something you paid for in your registration, and a full lunch. So both meals will be included at the USN University of Southern Maine Abram Center. Registration starts at 7:30 in the morning, and people will be on the street corners waving you into the parking lot, and you will be greeted at every entrance. There will be 6 lines for registration. So from 7:30 to 8:45 registration, and at 7:45 is when the hot breakfast is served in the atrium. If you've been there, it's a beautiful atrium. It will be served hot breakfast at 7:45. For an hour, breakfast will be available, and then we will be sitting in our areas. Our areas, the seating will be assigned per area, because at 12:15, areas will caucus to elect lay representatives for diocesan council. Convention will be convened at 9 a.m. and will break at noon. And again, we'll be conducting elections and our regular business. Buffet lunch will be open at 12:30, and that's after we caucus in our areas to elect our lay representatives to diocesan council. Business resumes at 1:30, and what I love is we'll be, of course, beginning with prayer, and noonday prayer will be included, and then we will be closing with prayers.
We've never done a one-day convention in recent memory, or it's been a long time. I think the only time we did one was when we made it a one-day convention because there was an approaching snowstorm. So this is a planned one-day convention, and the focus is going to be largely on our business. We're not doing many of the things that we've become accustomed to doing. There'll be no workshops. We're not having Eucharist. There'll be no special gatherings of various kinds. We will really do our business and go home. And we'll see what it's like. We'll see what that experience is like. The purpose of a one-day convention is really for us to make convention more accessible to a larger number of the members of our diocese. You won't have to take time off from work. You won't have to pay for 2 nights in a hotel. We really hope that this will open up the process to people who haven't been able to be delegates before because of time or expense. We're going to do this for 2 years. I've already heard lots of reasons not to like this. I think we need to experience to find out that there might be some reasons to like it, and to see if it not only serves our purpose as a diocese, but expands the pool of those who are able to attend. And after 2 years, we will make a decision about that.
So let me segue into 2017 convention, the second of one-day convention. It will be in Bangor at the Cross Center. Again, it will be a similar one-day agenda. with adjustments that we make based on the feedback from the one this year. It will be October 28th, 2017, and it will be a one-day convention up here. And I'm totally excited about that. So I'm really delighted to be coming. I want the Southern folks to come up here. And from then, we're going to make a recommendation on the rhythm of convention. You know, if the one day works and this is something that we want to continue, we'll evaluate that, and we'll evaluate how we want to share the geography of our diocese.
About this evening is elections. This is a year with lots of elections because of our General Convention deputies and alternates. And we have a number of people, enough people running this year that we actually have real elections. And so that's a good thing in my view, but it may also take a little more time than it has sometimes taken. And if you have your materials, I thought we would go through the nominees just briefly, and at least folks can be identified, and you can do your own investigating further. We will elect a secretary of the diocese. That's on page 6 of your materials, and that's been Lee Spar for 2 years, and Lee is standing again. From St. Patrick's in Brewer. So if you've been at convention, you know who Lee is. The treasurer of the diocese is also elected annually, and that is Dick Rosine. Dick's been treasurer now for 6 years, and Dick is thankfully standing again. The standing committee of the diocese is the only committee of the diocese that is all elected, has no appointed members. So that's a very important committee, and that committee serves as council of advice for the bishop and also has a role in the election and consecration of bishops and in property matters. So it's a very important committee, and it's also part of the ordination process. And this year we have an election happening in the clerical order. We have to elect one clergy person and one lay person every year for a term of 3 years. And so the nominees are the Reverend Tim Higgins from St. Anne's in Wyndham and the Reverend Nina Pooley from St. Bart's in Yarmouth, both running for the clerical position. And then Mr. Charles Priest from St. Paul's, Brunswick, running in the lay order. Then we get to General Convention deputies, and we have to elect 4 clergy and 4 lay, both as deputies and as alternates. So we have to elect a lot of people. And we gratefully have a lot of people running. And so we're on page 11. General Convention deputies serve from their election until the election of their successors. So the current deputies are still serving. And if there were a question about General Convention, they would be the ones to respond to it. And they will serve until our election in October. So you have the list, and we have, for the first time in a couple of General Conventions, nearly enough people running for both all of the deputy positions and the alternate positions, and we have to elect them, which is a very strange exercise. If you look, you can see there are only 8 clergy nominated for 8 slots. Is that right? 6 clergy. 6 clergy nominated for 8 spots. So you would say, well, it's an easy matter to fill the slots, but we elect them by the most votes. And the person who gets the most votes is the chair of the deputation. So we have to go through the exercise of voting until we're clear about the order of election. And the first 4 would be deputies, and the next 2 would be alternates. So that may take us a couple of ballots to sort that all out. And I will not go through each of those, but I commend them to you with the color photo. Pretty fun to have those color photos. And then in the lay order, we also have a good number of folks nominated. So we really will have to do a good job with the election. Then we have the disciplinary board. Now, this is not a well-known body in the diocese. We are part of a northern New England disciplinary process. Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine share a disciplinary board. The disciplinary board is a body which receives complaints against clergy under the disciplinary canon, Title IV, and determines what to do with them. And the pool of members gets appointed to various subgroups depending on what happens and what the chair of the disciplinary board decides. This is a group that does meet once a year for training, but hopes never to meet for actual work. And yet we have to have it in place. And it's, for purposes of good order, it's an odd number of folks. So we don't elect the same number of folks every year. We elect a different number depending on whose turn it is to elect what. And that's all worked out in the canon. So this year, we are electing one lay member of the disciplinary board for a term of 3 years. And the nominee is Elise Magnuson from the cathedral. We also elect trustees of the diocese. The trustees of the diocese are an independent corporation. They are not governed by the convention of the Diocese of Maine. Our connection with the trustees is the power of election. We elect, we choose the trustees. The trustees have just gone through a process, and I'm very pleased about this process, a process of reviewing their bylaws, and they have reduced the number of trustees to make it a more manageable body, and they have changed the bylaws to allow the election of a priest or a deacon to the trustees. This is a very significant change. The trustees has been all lay with the exception of the bishop since their founding. So under the new bylaws, the trustees will be 8 elected trustees, including up to 3 ordained persons, plus the bishop, which that's a big change for us in Maine. I think a very important change. I'm really proud of the trustees for taking this action. They just did this at the last meeting, so it will take a while for this to be felt. The 2 nominees for this year are current trustees, Larry Dwight, who is the current chair of the Board of Trustees, and Betsy McCandless, who is also a returning trustee. So in future, we would anticipate a convention seeing, hopefully, clergy as part of the slate for the office of trustee. I think that's really pretty wonderful.
I don't know if this is just one of the best years of all time to be on a resolution committee, or just a sad year, because we have just 3 really basic resolutions. There's no controversy. We're not addressing major issues in the world. We're not wrestling with war and peace and all the different things. And it's just 3 very straightforward resolutions.
And we'll take them in order. And I'm responsible for the first one, so I'll just go right into it. Resolution 1 is a canonical change, and it has to do with a committee of the diocese that was established by our canons. It's the Committee on the Church Pension Fund. The committee has never met in my time as bishop, but we elect it every year at convention. It was formed in an era when communication across the church was very much less efficient than it is now. And it was actually formed, my understanding, I've been told anyway, that it was formed here in the Diocese of Maine to advocate for a priest in a particular situation. I'm not sure if that's really true, but it existed to help interpret the pension and to assist clergy with the pension. In this day, they're just in the way. If you have a question about the pension fund, you call them in New York and you get help. It's a different reality, and it seems to me not good stewardship to find people to serve on a committee that never meets. And so the purpose of this resolution is simply to eliminate the committee, to retain the language about our participation in the pension fund, our support of the pension fund, all of that, but simply to eliminate a committee which has no function as far as I can tell. So that's what that's about. Any questions about that? Hear, hear. Okay.
I can't imagine anyone really objecting to this. But does anyone have any questions regarding the first resolution?
I'm Peter Bickford from Christchurch, Norway, and I'm chair of the Clergy Compensation and Lay Compensation Committee. Resolution 2, and I don't know if you have it with you, I've had a chance to read it over, deals with lay compensation. The Diocese of Maine, some of us in the Diocese of Maine, met in June talking with the people who have the Fair Wage Initiative that is coming for a vote in a little over a month, 6 weeks, somebody told me the other day, and trying to figure out what we could do as Episcopalians within the diocese. What we felt would support that the best was to live it. We also have a resolution that has come down from the executive committee and also through various general conventions that say that a living wage should be in the realm of $15 an hour, and they would like all dioceses to reach that by the year 2020. So what we did was we changed the resolution for lay compensation to $12 an hour. Heidi put it up on the dialogue. It went out to the diocese for comment. There were about 20 comments. It also went out to the diocese for any support that would come from any congregations. And I'm pleased to say that there are, and I lost count, but I think it's 9 congregations who signed on to support this resolution as it comes before convention. Also, the Maine Episcopal Network for Justice signed on as well. The intention of this is to set the minimum wage for lay workers within anybody connected with the Diocese of Maine at $12 an hour, or an equivalent, whatever you want to call it. It says equivalent salary, but if you call it something else, it should be $12 an hour. The 250 hours says it isn't somebody who just shows up occasionally to do something. It needs to be a regular person with reasonable hours involved. That's about 5 hours a week and throughout the year. The intention, although it's not in the resolution because you can't do it year after year, is to reach the $15 an hour goal by the year 2020, which would mean next year the resolution would say 13, 14, and in 2020 would say 15.
Terry, is there any clarification you can give about the salary related to 47.5 and the overtime and all of that?
The issue that we have is that the Department of Labor has issued a set of regulations which modifies overtime rules. And that's supposed to go into effect the 1st of December. 20 states have now challenged that in court. And so one of the issues with the wording that we have in there, that it applies to wages on an hourly basis and its equivalent in salary, is that regardless of what happens in the courts and what happens in the election coming up, that this resolution then would apply, that would carry forward regardless of outcomes. So that's why we stayed with that particular wording. Now with respect to the 47.5, in the next couple months, you're going to see a set of regulations that we're going to give to congregations on how to be in compliance with the Department of Labor overtime laws, which basically says a lot of us have been putting into play, we say we're going to pay so-and-so part-time person, we're going to pay them $150 a week. And that's what we put into the payroll system. Now we have to track their hours. So that's going to be different. The other thing is that the administrative exemption has been changed so that the rules with respect to, say, for instance, parish administrators, where in the past it was automatically assumed that if they're fairly free in their supervision, so to speak, they would qualify for being an exempt employee. That no longer applies. So we've got a whole set of rules that have changed, and you'll see that over the next couple of months as we submit to you what we see as being the guidelines for us to be in compliance. But the resolution that we submitted for lay employees, we submitted to try to take into account all possible outcomes, both lawsuit and in the election, because of course we don't know what a new administration would do with those particular regulations. So we're trying to be in compliance across the board.
For classroom teachers and administrators. So what we did for the current time being, and hoping that they will publish that because we use that information, is to take the 2015 numbers and apply the the consumer price index adjustment. Again, the information for the various congregations is listed in the appendix. And this pretty much follows what we've done in the past with a slight wrinkle. Any questions on that? Hearing none. Thank you.
So Finance Committee is made up of members from our diocesan council. So those are people who you elect at those area caucuses that you're going to hear about or you have already heard about from Carolyn. Those members are one lay member and one clergy member from each area. Some members of council are appointed so that we sort of have a slightly larger body, and they represent sometimes the areas more fully. And some members of finance are those of us who represent particular positions, like your treasurer, whom you elect at convention. Your finance canon, seemed important to have Terry there. And myself, and I'm appointed by the bishop to be the chair.
So as Nina said, we have the income side of the budget, we have the expense side of the budget. And if you looked at your package for convention and you memorized all of the lines, you'll see that the basic budget is listed on page 29 of your convention packet. And you'll see that income comes from three major categories. The first one is the assessment. The second is endowments, and the third is the other category, and I'll try to talk a little bit about each one of those. The other thing that I'm going to talk about tonight is the difference between an assessment and an ask. Again, Maine's canons, Canon 4 of the Diocese of Maine, says that convention shall set a yearly assessment on the parishes and missions. So it's required by canon. Our assessment rate for the last couple of years has been 15.4% of the normal operating income. Now that's, again, for those of you who haven't been through this, I want to try to explain it as best I can. For those of you who have heard it before, I apologize if it bores you. But normal operating income is that line item that appears on a parochial report that is all of the income that the congregation has received in the previous year. When we develop the budget, we're using the parochial report income from the previous year. So we can't set the budget for 2017 from 2016 income because we don't know what it is. So we're actually lagging a year in that we're using the income from the parochial report normal operating income line from 2015. So is that clear? And that's been 15.4%. This year, we are decreasing that assessment rate to 15%. And let me explain why we're doing that. At General Convention in Salt Lake City 2 years ago, Convention acted on a resolution to drop the ask rate from 19% over the following 3 years of the triennium to 15%. Now, I use the word ask. General Convention, the Episcopal Church, does not levy an assessment. The church asks the diocese to contribute an amount to set the budget for the national church. The Diocese of Maine has been paying its ask of 19%, and when it was a little bit higher, we were doing that. Some of our dioceses don't always contribute to that full ask. So the resolution was designed to get those dioceses, who were perhaps contributing 10% ask or 12% ask to begin to think about moving to that 15% level, to make it more equitable for those who are paying the full ask rate to come in concert with those who are not paying a full ask. And we'll see how that works out, because in Austin there will be some discussion about how that's worked out. So that's how we set our assessment rate. Our assessment rate is based on what we think we can ask the congregations to support in terms of their percentage of their budget to support the work of the Diocese of Maine and the greater church at large. Some congregations will see that although we have a slightly lower assessment, their assessment may go up, because during 2014, on which we base our assessment calculation, or income calculation, their income actually went up. So it won't be until the next year, when we put together the 2018 budget, that they'll begin to see a decrease in their assessment. So I hope that's clear. There's another line under assessments, and that's prior year assessments. Occasionally we have churches who are not able to make their full commitment to the diocese in a year. We give them a catch-up period of time, so that if they don't make their full assessment by December 31st, they have until convention of the following year to make their assessments in full. So we also budget a year for prior year assessments. Occasionally there's a change in treasurers, and that happens more often than we think, but it may take a couple of months for the new treasurer to get up to speed, and they didn't know that the last payment hadn't been made in December. So they're making a payment for 2016 actually in March. So that's where that budgeted number for income comes. The other one is endowments. That's the second largest piece of our income as we set our our income side of the budget. Endowments comprise about $9 million of the total endowments that the trustees manage over the year. So from that $9 million, we're able to forecast the income that we can take from those endowments towards the income side of our budget. And you'll see there's a whole list of funds ranging from the Episcopate Fund income, which all the congregations over the course of the year deposit with Loring House. That goes into the endowment for the Episcopate Fund, and then that's drawn off in subsequent years. And I don't need to read the rest of those. They're self-explanatory. We rely, or the trustees rely, on the stock market, the bond market, to project income, which is then paid out as the income side of the endowments. Those of you who are familiar with your congregation, which may have an endowment, you're receiving checks on a quarterly basis from the trustees at the same rate that our budget side is paid out as. And the trustees, like those of us who work on the finance committee, are very conservative. so that their fiduciary responsibility is to be conservative and manage the funds that have been invested with them to the best of their ability. We use the average income from the last 12 rolling quarters of the stock market. And that's so that we don't get caught short in a bad year like the 2008 recession. So we're able to carry over the lean times with the good times, and so we're using a rolling average of the last 12 quarters. I think I said months, but it's the last rolling 12 quarters. So that's the endowment side. The other side, as Nina talked about, is from the summer chapels, and I don't think we need to say anything more about that. And then you'll notice that it says miscellaneous income. The diocese charges the trustees a fee for cutting the checks that congregations receive. They pay the diocese $25,000 a year for Terry and Tom Sumner to manage those checks and do the bookkeeping necessary for the endowments. So those are the three areas of what we develop our income side of the budget from. And I'd be happy to take any questions that you might have.
So we have mission priorities funding, which Paul Baudet and his subcommittee are in charge of. So those line items include EFM, Episcopal Youth Events, the Committee on Indian Relations, the Christian Education lines, the Committee on Aging, and Episcopal Peace Fellowship lines. So those are diocesan programs, and in the spring when you see that go through the dialogue, if you're one of the people on those committees, you need to apply for your mission priorities grant. That's what that is, okay? And his subcommittee of council meets, goes over those applications and those grants, and then makes the recommendations to finance. Finance then puts those in the budget, and that becomes part of the package that we recommend to council for the budget that you see before you. The new initiative grants come before council. Those are, we don't have those line items individually, because what this is right now is simply the line item that holds the money that then becomes available for those grants for 2017. But those are grants available to congregations for new work on the ground. And we have $10,000 in the budget for the last couple of years, and that's what you see in that line item, which is good money, but we routinely get more new initiative grants than we have money to allocate from that line, and we use FFM money, usually another 10 to 16 a year. We tend to give about $26,000 a year toward new initiatives, and we've got some amazing work that's been done in the last several years. So that's some of the grant money that goes out to congregations, and that is available. Usually it's a twice a year cycle. So if you see that through the dialogue or you hear about that, that's money available to congregations for new work on the ground. The other grant cycle is the strategic mission support, and that is available to congregations, but it is more congregations that need money in order to make it happen. They're not going to, they're not going to be able to make it happen without it, right? We used to have, when we first got here in 2007, I started on the finance committee. Half of our congregations were receiving some kind of assistance. And the whole program was very, very different. And we have changed the way we do absolutely everything. And so many congregations are finding new ways to do the work that they do in their communities and have stepped off that list. And we only have a handful of people on this list now. But that is the SMS category, the Strategic Mission Support. Council, a couple years ago, got together and said, so we don't have enough money to fund everybody who needs money, because face it, I run a congregation, we could use some, right? Who can't use a little bit more? But if we had some, and we could fund a few congregations, strategic mission, where could we, where is this best spent? So we use those categories of vitality, viability, and location, and we've talked about that before in this category. We still use those categories when we're looking at the applications from sort of standalone traditional parishes. So last but not least, other things in the expense side that we think you ought to see. before you head into convention. Under bishop and staff lines, the living local costs. I know our bishop, it's on his agenda that he will talk about the living local program in his address, I believe. So you will hear more about that, but it's a big line item. And I would point that out to you partly because honestly, if something's worth paying for, it must be worth something, right? So maybe perk up, pay attention. We're paying for it. Maybe you ought to send some folks and get the advantage of what we've already committed to. Bishop's Word support is going to go up, we hope, if this budget is approved, by an additional $15,000. That's a big jump. We think it's the will of the diocese. We think that's what we hear. But that's a big jump. And like I said, there's things that shouldn't just slide by you. I want you to see them. I want you to think about that. I think that's a good thing, but that is not last year's news, right? That's new this year. We've added some line items. These are new things. EYE. We've decided that the EYE event ought to be something that we just fund. So we ought to fund kids going to the Episcopal Youth event, which happens every 3 years, the way we fund General Convention. So we ought to put money in the budget every year that accrues, so the group of kids that want to go to the National Episcopal Youth event from the Diocese of Maine, we have some money accrued every 3 years for them to go. This is not something that they have to locally do. They have to do their own fundraising anyway, but that we ought to be able to do something toward that. So we have a line item, a new one in the budget for $5,000 annually so that we can start accruing, so that we can start sending those kids with some funding from us. We think it's part of our Episcopal identity. We have some other line items. Breathe, but I'm going to say these words. The Episcopate transition. It's a reserve fund. We are trying to be responsible around the fact that our bishop may not be immortal. And that he might actually age with the rest of us. I hope not. Eventually, we need to have a plan. The plan needs to be funded. We simply want to be responsible and not add another gray hair to his head by not being willing to be responsible. So the Episcopate Transition Reserve is accruing some money toward that. The Bicentennial Reserve is accruing for the 2020 bicentennial. Again, we don't wait till the last minute. We know it's coming. It's going to be a big party. We ought to put some money away for that. And we've started what we're calling the Jubilee Centers Grant Reserve. After the council members who were working with the Jubilee Centers went and met with everybody, talked to them about what they needed, what they wanted, what they didn't need, they've decided what might be best is a reserve fund available to the Jubilee Centers should they have a need. And that's a new line item. So these are new things. These were not in the budget last year, and I want you to know about them. Last but not least, we're back to the beginning. That budget, those expenses, being as responsible as we could and doing what we think needs to happen on the ground, came out more than we thought our income would be, by $5,691. So we went back to our income side and took money from the Jeremiah Reserve Fund, which is a fund that we have actually been setting aside. We started it, hang on, I got this. What year did we start it, Dick? 2014. When we realized that we thought the income numbers, we just thought the numbers were going to come down hard and we needed to be responsible over a 5-year window. So we started putting money aside. And the idea was we set money aside in the reserve for 2.5 years of that 5-year window. And at the half point mark, we can start drawing out of the reserve. Last year was our half year. We were able to actually continue to put a little bit of money in. So 2017 is year 4. The first year we said we could really take money out. So we will take that $5,691 from that reserve. which is how we will balance this budget. And that is what that line item was meant for. And so that felt good to us, and it felt good to your council. But I want you to know that's what happened and why, and that's the mechanics of it. It's your budget, not our budget. So that's how we balance this budget and why we did it that way.
A new feature of this convention has to do with the election of area representatives to diocesan council. Historically, we've done those elections at area meetings held like this one, a pre-convention meeting held in the 8 areas of the diocese. With few exceptions, those meetings have not been well attended. And some congregations never attend because they're at night and it's too far. So our representatives from our areas to diocesan council have usually been elected by a small subset of the folks who could elect them. I've been concerned about this for some time now. Over the last couple of years, we have had some meetings where 2 or 3 people showed up. We've had meetings where the technology has failed and presentations haven't been made. We've really not had, I think, quality meetings across the diocese. And I'm particularly concerned about how that affects elected representatives. Our canons are very clear about who is eligible for election. And that is for lay representatives, communicants in good standing of the diocese, and for clergy representatives to council, canonically resident clergy. And that's also the electorate, communicants in good standing and canonically resident clergy. The canons are silent on about how they're elected or when they're elected. There's no direction, except that the council may direct how they're elected. So the council has chosen, with a lot of pushing from me, that we elect at convention, when all the congregations will be represented and where there'll be at least some balance between congregations. So there will be caucus meetings at this convention where those who have been nominated will be presented in your caucus, in your area, and there are a few where no one's been nominated. So just one now. I get the high. Okay, so one where there's no nominee, and that caucus will have to determine how to address that. But the convention delegates will caucus by area with ballots and will elect their representatives to the diocesan council. I think that although this will limit in some ways the electorate to those who are at convention, it will actually increase the number of congregations participating and the number of votes cast. So I think on balance it's a win, and it allows us to stop having numerous failed pre-convention meetings and to do what we're doing this year, to have 2, one north and one south, and to provide material online for everybody who can't make a pre-convention hearing. So look for that at convention. Your area will caucus to elect this year your lay representative to diocesan council. And again, we'll see how it goes. I think we'll have a net increase in participation, but we will find out if there are other unforeseen problems with doing it this way. The question is to say a little bit about taking the elements of our 2-day convention and how we've deconstructed it. As I said at the outset of this meeting, I've been very concerned about participation, and the purpose of the 1-day convention is to increase participation, to take less time and to make it less costly, so that more people might make themselves available as delegates. But there's a lot in our 2-day convention that we're going to be missing, and is valuable to us. And so part of that plan for a 1-day convention was to take the workshops out and create a separate workshop day for the diocese. We did that this year. We called it Spring Training. It was held in Brunswick. We had nearly 150 people out for that, and many more than we would get ordinarily at convention, and different folks, not just delegates. So I think that was highly successful, and we plan to do it again, and we plan to expand it. Actually, we're going to need a bigger location. We got about as many people at St. Paul's as we could manage. So we're going to have to find a larger venue, but we will have spring training again in 2017. And the other piece is worship. And I had hoped to have a large worship service in this late spring of 2016 that the diocese might come together for, but it really didn't work out well. We did not have an ordination service or on a major occasion, so it seemed quite artificial just to have a worship service. But I think that the opportunity for the diocese to come together to worship is important. So that's one other piece to look at over time to figure out how we can do that as a diocese. So the elements of the former two-day convention are still alive in the diocese. They just aren't on convention weekend. And again, that'll be part of the evaluation that we need to do to see if this is really working out for us. I think the separate workshop day is clearly a plus. So much more participation and so many more workshops than we've had in the past. We had 21 workshops, and feedback was there was really only one that wasn't quite up to snuff. So that's, in my book, pretty good. But I think that it was a better to have a whole day dedicated to workshops and to have it more available. So we'll continue to work on that, and I think we would continue to do that even if we went back to a two-day convention, because it's clearly better to do the workshops separately. Any other questions to come before? This has been a lively meeting. Thank you, everybody. It's great. And why don't we close with prayer, shall we? Gracious and loving God, we give you thanks for calling us together as your people to think and talk together about many matters important to our common life. We thank you that people have been free to speak their minds and raise the concern of their hearts. And we thank you for the leaders of the diocese who give so much time to prepare for this meeting and to prepare a budget for our consideration. We ask you to bless us as we return to our homes, keep us safe on the road, help us in our various communities to encourage an open and healthy dialogue about all these matters, and so prepare us to come together, to seek your wisdom, and with the guidance of the Holy Spirit, to make good decisions for our life together. Bless us this night and always. In Christ's name, amen. Go in peace to love and serve the Lord.